There's a moment in every chosen one's life that no one talks about. A moment so quiet, so subtle, that it doesn't look like a fall, it looks like a whisper. You were born with purpose. You felt it. Even as a child, you knew you were different, sensitive, powerful, deeply aware. You could feel energies before anyone explained them. You saw through lies before you had words for truth. You were meant to carry light. But what happens when that very light begins to flicker? Not all at once, but like a candle in a storm, fragile, fading, quietly gasping for breath. We've been told the chosen are invincible, that once you awaken, you never fall. But that's the biggest lie of all. Because the deeper you go into the light, the more shadow you expose. The brighter your inner flame, the more darkness it illuminates. You begin to see not just the world's pain, but your own. And when you're not ready for that truth, when no one prepares you for that level of intensity, the light can begin to hurt. It turns inward. It begins to burn. And a chosen one who doesn't know how to transmute that fire becomes the very thing they were sent to heal. Let's begin at the edge where the light starts to bend. It often begins with exhaustion. A soul tired of carrying the weight of others. You've been the healer, the guide, the one they all come to. But who do you go to? You spent so long being the light that you forgot how to rest in the dark. And that is where the danger begins. Not in evil intentions, not in malice, but in fatigue, in emotional depletion, in spiritual isolation. You start to question your purpose. You start to resent the very people you once loved serving. And slowly, silently, the light dims.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
But here's the deeper truth. The light doesn't disappear, it inverts. It turns inward, implodes, and what was once radiance becomes intensity. You begin to feel powerful, but not in a loving way, in a controlling way. You begin to see how easily people follow you, how quickly they believe in you, and the ego feeds on that. The chosen one begins to become the center, not of service, but of power. And if you're not careful, the light becomes a weapon. You begin to manipulate instead of inspire. You begin to dominate instead of heal. You begin to consume instead of give. This is not a fall from grace, it's a transformation. But not all transformations are sacred. Some are corrupted. Some are twisted by pain, by loneliness, by pride. The chosen one starts using their gifts not to elevate others, but to elevate themselves. And here's the terrifying part, it still looks like light. On the outside, nothing has changed. You still speak truth. You still channel wisdom. You still perform miracles. But the source has shifted. The intention is no longer pure. The energy is no longer love. It's control. It's fear. It's ego cloaked in divinity. And the world celebrates you. They call you master. They praise your words. But inside you feel the hollowness growing. You feel the light dying. And you don't know how to stop it. Because to admit you've turned is to admit you were never as pure as they believed. To admit you've lost your way is to risk everything: your identity, your legacy, your image. So you pretend. You push deeper into performance, deeper into illusion. And that's when the real danger begins. Because now you're not just lost, you're lying to yourself. What happens when light turns dark in a chosen one? The world doesn't notice at first, but the world begins to suffer. Because the energy you once gave freely now comes with strings. The teachings that once liberated now bind. The presence that once healed now drains. And the people around you feel it, even if they can't name it. They feel the shift, the distortion, and the heaviness. But they're too in awe to question you, too attached to your image to challenge your truth. And so the darkness grows unchecked. But inside you, something is breaking. Because no chosen one ever truly forgets who they are. Deep down, beneath the ego, beneath the performance, beneath the shadow your soul remembers. And that memory becomes a haunting, a voice in the middle of the night, a vision during meditation, a pain in your chest when you speak words that no longer carry spirit. You begin to split. The light inside you begins to scream. And for the first time, you have to face the thing you've been avoiding all along, yourself. Let me ask you something you may not want to answer. Have you ever used your light to get what you want? Have you ever spoken truth from a place of manipulation? Have you ever hidden your wounds behind wisdom? Because if you have, you're not alone. We all have. Every chosen one walks the line between service and self, between divinity and distortion. The question is not whether you've fallen. The question is whether you're willing to return. Because here's the gift hidden in the fall. Darkness is not the end, it's the invitation. When your light turns dark, it's not because you failed. It's because you're finally being asked to purify, to burn away the ego, to strip the image, to return to essence. And that journey is brutal. It's lonely. It's humiliating. But it is holy. Because it's in the fire of your own undoing that you rediscover real light. Not the light of being praised, the light of being true. But to get there, you must stop running, stop pretending, stop performing. You must look at the part of you that enjoys the power, the control, the image. And you must forgive it. Not justify it, forgive it. Because that part of you was never evil. It was scared. It was broken. It was tired. And it needed love, not judgment. That's where healing begins. Not in banishing the shadow, but in embracing it. In saying, even this part of me is worthy of redemption. And when you do that, when you finally face the truth of your fall, something unbelievable happens. The light returns, but not like before. Not external, not performative. This time it rises from within. Quiet, steady, unshakable. Because it's no longer about being chosen. It's about choosing yourself, choosing truth over image, humility over pride, integrity over applause. And that is the beginning of real power. So if you feel yourself slipping, if you feel your light turning dark, don't hide, don't run, don't perform. Go inward. Ask yourself, what part of me is still in pain? What part of me is still waiting to be seen, to be held, to be loved? Because when you heal that part, you heal the source. You realign the current. You restore the flow. And suddenly, the light you carry is no longer a burden. It's a blessing, again. This is not a warning. It's a map. Every chosen one will face the dark night. Every chosen one will be tempted by power. And every chosen one will either be consumed by it or reborn through it. The choice is yours. The invitation is now. There comes a moment when the chosen one, standing in the wreckage of their own illusion, must choose between rebuilding the mask or returning to the soul. And in that moment, the silence becomes deafening. The applause has faded. The followers may still be there, but their presence no longer feeds you. Because you've tasted the hollowness of light that no longer heals. You've seen what happens when truth is spoken without embodiment. And now, you can't unsee it. You can't pretend anymore. That's the moment of spiritual reckoning, and it's the most sacred threshold a chosen one can cross. But it's terrifying, because it means letting go of everything you built from your original wounding. The identity, the authority, the image of being the one who knows. It means admitting you were wrong, not in your essence, but in your execution. It means surrendering the light you once used to feel safe and letting it dissolve into something more honest. And that honesty is brutal, because it doesn't just strip away the false, it strips away the familiar. Who are you without the pedestal? Who are you without the power? Who are you when there's no one left to impress? This is where the real work begins. Not in the outer world, but in the inner chamber. The invisible place where your soul and your shadow meet face to face. You begin to see the wounds behind your wisdom, the pain behind your prophecy. You realize that much of your light came from a need to be seen, to be needed, to be validated. And when those needs aren't healed, the light becomes distorted. It starts as a gift, but it ends as a performance. And the moment you realize that you're offered a choice, humility or illusion, most don't choose humility. It's too costly. It means stepping back. It means losing followers, losing influence, losing the structure your ego built. But if you choose it even slightly, you unlock something deeper than impact. You unlock intimacy. Intimacy with yourself, with your real voice, with the part of you that doesn't need to be special to be sacred. That's where the new light is born. Not the light that shines to be seen, but the light that radiates because it can't help but be real. This new light is different. It doesn't perform. It doesn't seek. It simply is. It's the light of stillness, not spectacle, of presence, not persona. And when you carry this kind of light, people can feel the difference. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to convince anyone. Your being becomes the transmission. Your silence becomes the sermon. Your integrity becomes the invitation. And that is the true return of the chosen one, not louder, but deeper. But before that return can happen, you have to go all the way into the shadow. You have to sit with the guilt. The guilt of knowing you used your power to feel worthy. The guilt of knowing you spoke words you didn't fully live. The guilt of knowing you became the very thing you once swore to heal. And you must feel it, not bypass it, not rationalize it. Feel it. Because pain that is truly felt is pain that can finally be released. And when you release it, you reclaim the part of you that was trapped inside it. Have you ever asked yourself, what part of my light is still wounded? What part of my mission is still about me? What part of my guidance is still seeking applause? These are the questions that save you. Not because they give you answers, but because they humble you. They bring you back to the ground. And only when you return to the ground can you rise again, not on a pedestal, but on a foundation. The world doesn't need more gurus. It needs more humans who have faced themselves, who have walked through the fire of their own ego and come out with nothing left but love. Love that doesn't need to be seen. Love that doesn't need to be followed. Love that simply gives because it overflows. That's the love of a true chosen one. Not the love that saves others, but the love that awakens them. Not through words, but through example. And here's the paradox. When you let go of the need to be powerful, you become unstoppable. When you release the need to be seen, you become magnetic. When you no longer need to be right, you become wisdom itself. That's the reversal. That's the sacred fall. The light turns dark not to destroy you, but to awaken you. It strips you, not to shame you, but to return you. And once you've been stripped of everything false, you realize something profound. There is no chosen one. There is only the one who chooses to be real. This realization is both devastating and liberating, because it means your light was never yours to own. It was borrowed. It was channeled. It was gifted to you, not for your identity, but for your service. And when you misuse it, it doesn't disappear, it waits. It waits for the moment you remember, the moment you return, the moment you stop trying to be a master and start becoming a mirror. So now, ask yourself, are you willing to let it all fall apart? Are you willing to lose the image, the influence, the illusion, in order to find the truth? Because if you are, the universe will meet you there. It will strip you bare, yes, but it will also rebuild you not in the image of a guru, but in the image of love, pure, unfiltered love. And from there, your light will no longer turn dark. It will turn true. This is the hidden path of the chosen one. Not the path of glory, but the path of surrender. Not the path of being celebrated, but the path of being emptied. And only the ones brave enough to walk it will discover the secret, that the light you thought you lost was never gone. It was just waiting for you to become quiet enough to feel it again. If you're in the dark, feeling the shift, sensing the distortion, this is not your end. This is your initiation. You're not failing. You're being refined. You're not falling. You're being humbled. And that humility is not weakness. It's power in its purest form. The kind that doesn't need to shine to be real. The kind that doesn't need to speak to be heard. The kind that doesn't need to lead to transform. And when you walk from that place, your presence becomes medicine. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. You simply are. And the world feels it. The world softens. The world remembers. Because your light is no longer about you. It's about truth. When you've walked through the fire of your own undoing, when you face the mirror, not with pride but with trembling honesty, something changes forever. You no longer seek to be a beacon in the way the world defines it. You don't need to be followed. You don't need to be worshipped. You don't even need to be understood. Because the light you carry now is no longer there to prove anything. It simply exists as a silent frequency, a living vibration, an echo of what's been earned through pain, reckoning, and relentless self-inquiry. That's the light that can never turn dark again, not because it's perfect, but because it no longer resists its own shadow. When a chosen one truly returns from the darkness, they walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with reverence. Not with the need to lead, but with the willingness to walk beside. They've seen what happens when light is used as a mask, and they've chosen truth instead. And truth is not glamorous. It's not always beautiful. But it's real. And in a world drowning in performance, realness is the most healing force there is. You become a sanctuary, not because you offer answers, but because you offer space. Not because you shine brighter than others, but because you no longer dim their light to keep yours alive. This is where legacy is born, not in what you build, but in what you allow others to become. When your light is no longer about your name, your brand, your platform, it becomes a field of permission. The others begin to wake up around you, not because you taught them, but because you remembered yourself. And your remembering calls their soul forward. That's the ripple effect of a chosen one who has turned their darkness into depth instead of denial. You don't just create change, you are the change, quiet, rooted, unshakable. But let's not romanticize the journey. This path requires constant vigilance, constant humility. The ego will always look for a way back in. It will whisper, "You've healed enough. You've arrived. You're safe now." That's when the real discipline begins. Because the moment you believe you are beyond the fall is the moment you're most vulnerable to it. Real light doesn't chase invincibility. It stays close to the ground. It remembers the pain. It honors the fragility of power. And it chooses, moment by moment, to remain in service to something greater than self. Ask yourself, what are you really serving? Is it your soul or your image? Is it truth or the idea of being right? Is it love or the need to be needed? These questions aren't meant to shame, they're meant to free you. Because when you answer them honestly, you strip away the illusions that keep your light conditional. You begin to access a love that doesn't need validation to exist, a power that doesn't need to dominate to be felt, a truth that doesn't need to be defended to be alive. In this space, your presence becomes a calibration tool. People begin to feel more like themselves around you. They become more honest, more courageous, more awake. Because your integrity is a tuning fork, and it calls them into alignment. You don't even need to say much. Your silence becomes a container. Your stillness becomes a transmission. And your journey from light, through darkness, back to essence becomes the unseen gift you carry in every room you enter. This is the real calling of the chosen one. Not to be elevated, but to elevate. Not to be followed, but to awaken others to their own path. And sometimes that means being invisible. Sometimes that means being misunderstood. Sometimes that means walking away from the spotlight you once craved. But when you've truly returned to yourself, none of that matters anymore. Because you know the only thing worth protecting is your peace. The only thing worth amplifying is your truth. And the only thing worth building is a life that reflects your soul, not your ego's agenda. You begin to see your past distortion not as shame, but as initiation. Not as failure, but as forging. You realize that the only reason you fell was so you could rise differently, not higher, deeper. You're no longer obsessed with being the most enlightened person in the room. You're focused on being the most present, the most honest, the most human. Because that's what the world needs. Not perfect leaders, but embodied ones. Not untouchable icons, but relatable mirrors. And it's in this space, this sacred, stripped-down space, that your true light begins to glow again. Not like a spotlight, but like a steady flame. One that doesn't flicker with every opinion. One that doesn't shake with every challenge. One that doesn't burn others to stay alive. You become the fire that warms, not the fire that consumes. The light that reveals, not the light that blinds. And from that place you can finally rest. Not because your work is done, but because you're no longer doing it from a place of needing to be someone. Let me ask you something now that perhaps you've never dared to ask yourself. If no one ever clapped again, would you still speak truth? If no one ever followed again, would you still walk with integrity? If the world forgot your name, would you still remember your soul? Because the answers to these questions reveal everything. They reveal where your light is sourced. They reveal whether you're still performing or finally embodying. And they show you whether your light is still tied to approval or if it has finally returned home. This is what happens when light turns dark in a chosen one and then turns back into something deeper. Not brighter, but more real. You don't stand above others, you stand among them, not as a savior, but as a reminder that we are all light, that we all forget, that we all fall, but that we can all return, and that the return is not a punishment. It's a gift, a sacred reclamation. So if you're watching this and you felt the pull toward ego, the drift into the shadow, the temptation to use your light for image rather than impact, this is your invitation back. Not to the pedestal, not to the platform, but to the pulse of your own being, to the breath that comes before the words, to the silence that speaks louder than any sermon, to the place where your light was born before it was ever seen. Remember this, your greatest power was never in being chosen. It was in choosing to surrender, choosing to return, choosing to serve. And when you do that, your light can never truly turn dark again, because it's no longer about you. It's about truth. And truth never fades. It only waits patiently for your return.